To outsiders, they're a viral sensation, strange behaviors, haunting stares, and millions of views online. But to locals, they're something else entirely. They call them the Whittakers, America's most inbred family. On a quiet road in the town of Odd, West Virginia, a family sits on their front porch, the Whittakers. Their home is buried deep in the Appalachian region, an expanse of mountains, forests, and winding rivers. The family sits on their porch on scuffed, mismatched furniture, the paint peeling from the dirty walls behind them. A bearded man named Ray looks barely sentient, grunting and barking like the family dog. He clutches a half-empty soda bottle and a sandwich he's struggling to handle. Timmy, a grown man, lies on the couch, his eyes darting every direction, his face shifting between confusion and childlike expressions. Family photos show buck-toothed grins, drooling mouths, and unkempt faces. Eyes drifting in different directions seem to embody the risks of generations of inbreeding. It's unsettling, even frightening, a visceral reaction shaped in part by a long history of caricature aimed at poor rural white communities, especially those in the Appalachian Hills. The Whittaker family is often cited as living proof of inbreeding. They've been documented several times on camera, their lives attracting both fascination and outrage. Some call it poverty porn, exploitation disguised as curiosity. Others argue the footage offers a glimpse into lives that are usually hidden from view. Whatever the opinion, the Whittakers' portrayal has sparked intense controversy. But is inbreeding really common in Appalachia, or is it a lazy stereotype? First of all, Appalachia is enormous. It stretches more than 1,000 miles through 13 U.S. states, from southern New York to northern Alabama and Mississippi. It includes parts of Georgia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Tennessee, all of West Virginia. Roughly 26 million people live there, and many of them reside in modern towns and cities, work in industry, attend college, and live lives no different from anywhere else in America. So to generalize about Appalachians as if they were one kind of tribe is not only unfair, it's absurd. That said, the stories of isolated mountain families living in collapsing cabins are rooted in some truth. Poverty and geography once trapped generations far from American modernity, and for some families far from schools and healthcare. People often married within their small communities not because they wanted to keep it in the family, but because poverty and distance left them with not much choice. Still, studies show that while cases of inbreeding do exist in parts of Appalachia, genetic evidence indicates the region's overall rate is no higher than most of rural America. For so-called hillbillies, sex with a close relative is just as taboo as it is for people living in cramped Manhattan apartments or sprawling Los Angeles suburbs. Sure, in some isolated communities in Appalachia, there might, in some instances, be more limited gene flow, but that can be expected where people live in semi-isolation. Around 0.2% of U.S. marriages are between second cousins, and that might also happen in Appalachia. But there is no hard evidence to show the rampant inbreeding stereotypes hold any weight at all. Generations ago, tough Scots, Irish, English, and German settlers made this region their home. They built small, tight-knit communities that grew into a distinct culture, a world apart from the giant concrete cities of the United States. Some of these remote mountain towns, often far from the beaten path, became the setting for America's rural stereotypes. Tales of backward locals, banjo-playing hill folk with strange faces and stunted minds. This image reflected a long history of discrimination against generations of people who struggled through poverty, government neglect, and isolation. The aspersion cast far and wide was that these people didn't let their apples fall far from the family tree. The Whittakers don't seem to understand that the defects many of them have are a result of inbreeding. When one was asked about it, he reportedly said it was likely due to coal mining, referring to a family member's eyes that don't look forward. That's not true. The family's physical and mental issues are a consequence of inbreeding. As we've said, there isn't a culture of it in Appalachia, but that family did make the mistake of having children with their own kin. In the late 1800s, twin brothers John and Henry each had families of their own. From those families, a son named Harry and a daughter named Sally, first cousins, later married and had 7 children together, a sure way to keep the family's gene pool small. Of those 7 children, one, John Issam, married his first cousin Ada. Together, they had 9 children, including a daughter named Gracie. She went on to marry John, the grandson of Harry, and between 1940 and 1965, they had 15 children of their own. Many of those had physical and mental disabilities. Some of the children appear cognitively typical, if a bit slow to respond, while others, particularly Ray, show clear and severe impairments in both cognition and speech. Still, Timmy, a grandson of Gracie, might look slow on the uptake, but he's the only Whittaker in the videos to have finished high school. It's not certain why some of the family members communicate in grunts and they don't seem able to understand simple questions, but it might be a consequence of autism. The jury is still out on that one, and it'll probably remain that way. As for how inbreeding causes these problems, it comes down to genetics. Every human carries 2 copies of each gene, one from their mother and one from their father. Normally, if you inherit a faulty copy, the healthy one keeps everything running smoothly. The trouble starts when both copies carry the same defect. If, like the Whittakers, generations of your family members have been mixing within the same limited gene pool, there is a higher chance you'll get a double whammy. When that happens, the hidden mutation becomes unmasked, and the result can be a recessive genetic disorder, conditions that might affect physical development, cognition, or appearance. Genes also determine how your face is built, including symmetry, which is why we often say that really beautiful or handsome people have good genes. They govern spacing, proportion, and balance. When the same gene pool repeats, minor quirks can amplify into visible differences. Wide-set or close-set eyes, flattened features, asymmetry. That's why we sometimes see the Whittakers' drifting gazes and uneven expressions. Recessive mutations can mix unpredictably, creating neurological confusion. For some of the Whittakers, that means mild learning delays. For Ray, who communicates mostly in grunts and barks, profound intellectual disability. It's a risk that has appeared throughout history, from royal dynasties to poor families in remote valleys. But for the Whittakers, it became a lifelong curse. One of the most shocking modern examples comes from Australia, the Colt family. June married her brother Tim, and the two settled in a remote rural area. From there, everything stayed in-house for generations. The results were horrific. Children born with deformities, acts of cruelty toward animals, and widespread abuse within the family. While we can blame family culture for the very bad behavior, as well as horrific living conditions, inbreeding no doubt created a bonfire of psychological problems. When police found 40 of them all living together in shacks and tents in the 90s, the chief inspector said it was like nothing I'd ever seen. Some of these kids looked like ancient savages. They were almost all a product of inbreeding. The kids were feral, eating with their hands, not even knowing how to use toilet paper or brush their teeth. As for the obvious physical defects, it seems they weren't as bad as you might imagine. While some of the kids had sight and hearing issues, only one had dysmorphic facial features. Still, some had intellectual disabilities and were barely able to communicate with social workers. Does this mean you can do the opposite? Breed for perfection? Genes are like the script of a play. It matters who directs, where it's performed, and how the audience reacts. The environment turns certain genes on or off through what scientists call epigenetics, chemical markers that act like dimmer switches, altering how strongly genes express themselves. What they don't do is dictate exactly what kind of person you'll become. It's hard to plan for a genius or a supermodel because so many different genes are at work, and they're all expressing themselves in different ways with each other, and in the unique environment. That said, it's best to embrace genetic diversity, or as you've seen, things can go very wrong. Which brings us back to the Whittaker family, whose sudden exit from obscurity has no doubt reinforced some of those old stereotypes about the Appalachians. They have been hounded by strangers and have asked for people to stay away. Their neighbors have warned that shotguns will be drawn if any more people turn up at the household. The family went from being completely unknown to starring in the British tabloids. They even have their own Wikipedia page, but all they ever wanted was a quiet life. Still, they didn't make it easy on themselves. When one of them lied and said there'd been a death in the family, Larry, who is nonverbal, it was his daughter BJ. Seems that she thought her family's popularity could be exploited. After collecting about $100,000 in donations, it turned out Larry was very much alive. They might have some issues, but they're just trying to survive in what for generations for them has been a history of hardship and poverty. The derision they faced for inbreeding comes on the back of a longer history of poor families in the rural South receiving bad press and condemnation from so-called educated people. The negative stereotype started a long time ago. Like many Appalachian families, the Whittakers might be called hillbillies, a pejorative term, but poor Southern whites have been called all sorts of names throughout history. Clay eaters, the destitute who literally ate clay to survive, swamp dwellers, rednecks, hillbillies, and more recently, white trash. Families like the Whittakers occupied the lowest rung of America's class ladder, who for centuries were viewed as dirty, lawless, and uncivilized, pushed into the hills or down into the swamps. By the late 19th century, poverty had become pathologized. Families in the rural South were not seen just as poor, but as biologically defective. In the early 20th century, States like Virginia and North Carolina even carried out forced sterilizations to protect outcasts from their own supposed misery. National newspapers and social workers described Southern children as yellow-skinned and hollow-eyed, stunted, rotten-toothed, diseased, proof they claimed of generations corrupted by ignorance and incest. The message was the same. It was all in the blood. Politicians and intellectuals talked openly about degenerate imbeciles and waste people, a fungus growth on American society that was holding the nation back. That was the height of the eugenics movement, when poor white families like the Whittakers' ancestors were told they needed to be sterilized for the good of everyone else. This wasn't a fringe view, it was considered progressive. Few questioned the real causes of suffering: poverty, hunger, lack of education, and government neglect. Things changed later in the 20th century, but the stereotypes never fully died. They resurfaced in popular culture, most infamously in the 1970s film Deliverance, and they have remained ever since. So when people today mock the Whittakers, they are tapping into centuries of prejudice aimed at the poorest families in the rural South. The Whittakers didn't create the myth, they inherited it. One family's tragedy has reignited an old American story about class, poverty, and the cruelty of judgment disguised as curiosity. Life in Appalachia remains hard. Mining collapsed, jobs vanished, and drugs filled the void. The Whittakers aren't alone in their struggle. They're part of a region long abandoned by the systems meant to help it. But if life was already hard for the Whittakers, it got harder in 2024 when a mobile home belonging to one of the family burned down. Rumors circulated that it might have been arson. The home belonged to BJ, Larry's daughter, the only Whittaker known to have a drug problem. Given her history with lies, people were reluctant this time to send the family GoFundMe money. It doesn't help matters that some of the family members struggle to walk, their health is evidently not very good, and that's not too surprising given that 22.5% of people aged 35 to 64 in Appalachia live with a disability, far higher than the US average of 16.6%. At least the Whittakers stick together, and for all their problems, they seem like a stable family unit. While Jason and his friends succumbed to drugs and crime, except for BJ, the Whittakers have managed to stay away from drugs and don't touch alcohol either. So statistically, Appalachia is on average a hard place to grow up. In money, in health, in employment, and in everyday life. It's not all doom and gloom in this very beautiful part of the US, but with so much unemployment, poverty, and abuse, life is hard for most people who stick around. But the Whittakers seem okay with how things are. They're all sober, they have enough to eat, and they have a roof over their heads. They might not have much in material goods, but they have each other, and from the look on their faces, that's enough. America's most inbred family is a harrowing tale, but they are nothing compared to the royal bloodlines that nearly wiped out Europe's ruling class. Watch why royal inbreeding doomed Europe to see how it all unraveled, or click on this video instead.